Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Salam Rami.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Kashmala. How's it going? Can you hear me fine?
I'm Alhamdulillah, yes, I can hear you. I just wanted to sorry if I can make a quick correction. I'm only in my 4th year of PhD right now, so I'm not a doctor yet. So you
Okay,
can just
future
say
doctor,
Kashmala.
inshallah. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. No worries. Okay. All right, I am going to be putting in the slides so that people can follow. Uh, yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to have this live stream with future Dr. Kashmala, inshallah. Just a quick introduction about her. So, Kashmala Qasim completed her undergrad studies in psychology from the University of Toronto and completed a master's in neuroscience from McMaster University, which is where I go. She
Oh,
also
nice.
had completed the Ta'lim al-Quran Diploma course from Al-Huda Institute. Kashmala has been a lecturer in the Department of Psychology at the Islamic Online University and has also received a Level 1 pastoral counseling training from the University of Toronto. She's now pursuing a PhD at York University in psychology and is a researcher with Khalil Center. Kashmala's dissertation involves conducting a qualitative research study looking at the development of an Islamically integrated peer support group for Muslim mental health for mental health in Muslim women using arts-based approaches. All right. We're very excited to have you today. Thank you so much for offering the time, especially on the first day of Ramadan. So yeah, the floor is all yours, and please take it away. And just let me know when to switch
Okay,
the
sure.
slides.
Okay, sure. I will let you know. And I am such a nerd. I have like my slides open here on my laptop as well. So I will be looking back and forth
Perfect.
between the two screens if that's okay. If
That's
you can
perfect.
just, I just see the last slide actually on this video. If you can just put it to the first slide.
First slide. Okay. Yes. One moment. And
This
there we
is the
go.
end of the presentation. Okay, perfect. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Jazakallah khair for being here with me today. I'm going to get started because there's other speakers as well. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا زدنا علما. So today's is just about these times of uncertainty and placing it in the context. Next slide, please. So I have a bit of an agenda, which I don't even know if this is appropriate for Instagram Live. I literally just downloaded Instagram yesterday, so this is all very new to me. So if there's any technical glitches, please do forgive me for that. So we're just gonna very quickly talk about how we can validate our situation and feelings.
Don't worry about it.
And then take a different perspective than personality psychology and talk about just certainty and Allah's knowledge that we know from the Quran. And then I'm going to talk about a really interesting study that was done by Yaqeen Institute, talking about this idea of uncertainty and tolerance. Second part, inshallah, will be just what anxiety is and how to cope with anxiety and some practical steps and where you can go if you do need some more professional help. Next slide. Okay, so in the next slide, I just have a quick note that this talk is primarily from research psychology lens. So I am not a clinical, so I cannot diagnose anyone, but I can definitely give you the literature and the references to go and about perhaps what you might be experiencing. And the findings that I mentioned are from a study by Yaqeen, references given there. So all credit goes to these authors who put the surveys as well. Next slide. In this slide, I just want to assure that we can hopefully do a quick check-in with many times when we do workshops like these, we kind of forget to just assess how we are doing. And I like exactly how I'm feeling. A little bit more safe. So number one, just assess your feelings, and you don't have to have like an emotions chart in front of you, just any emotional vocabulary that you have for yourself. And then just ask yourself, how are you feeling about Ramadan 2020? How's it been going today, if you started fasting today, for those of us who are fasting tomorrow, assess that as well. Then verbalize the feeling. If you think you're going to sound crazy just talking to yourself, just in your head, and then accept the feeling. So don't give yourself any like excuses, or don't try to solve the emotion. So I'm giving an example here in this slide, and this was actually from last week before Ramadan. I said to myself out loud, feel both relaxed and anxious. It's kind of a weird mix that we won't get to have iftar with family and friends. I do feel like I'll have more time research aspect of it. And if any of you are research nerds or academia nerds, I hope you will appreciate this study. So we know from the literature that people want certainty in life, and some personalities more than others. So there's actually a personality model. It's called the Big Five. I don't have an image of it here because I don't want it to be like a personality psychology class. But the acronym is OCEAN, OCEAN. And I'm just focusing on the C, which stands for conscientiousness. Psychologists not diagnose, but assess on the trait to be someone who is very routine, you prefer structure, you like things organized, you're not very flexible. And then if you are someone who is low on trait level conscientiousness, then you're someone who is very flexible, you like spontaneity, you don't mind a little bit of mess and clutter here and there. And this trait and all the other traits from a will change except for Allah. That's just like a given. And this ayah from Surah Luqman, ayah number 34, this ayah really gave me a lot of hope last week when I was feeling super anxious and kind of uncertain about everything. And the ayah, I'm just paraphrasing here, that Allah alone knows the knowledge of the hour, so the day of judgment. He knows when the rain will come down, what is in the wombs. And there's no soul that knows when he or she will die, or when what will happen tomorrow, essentially, and Allah is all knowledgeable. So this ayah it's so super comprehensive, and it talks about the knowledge of Allah and the fact that a lot of things are actually uncertain in our life, regardless of this COVID-19 situation. So there are so many things that happen every day, and they don't ask you for your permission if they can change, and you just kind of adapt to it. So I thought of some of those things. So things like the seasons, the weather, your emotions from like morning till evening, family members and their emotions. Like people are not going to ask you like, oh, is it okay if I change? Are you like uncertain about things? Things just change and you adapt to it. So I was trying to implement this ayah into the current situation as well, that nothing really has changed. Like everything was always in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we are being tested, and especially individuals with certain personalities, perhaps the test is more for them. Next slide, please. So what exactly is certain? So this is another ayah, and this I really got a lot of inspiration from as well, which is in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 155. And this ayah, I think it's been quite popularized these days, that Allah will surely test you with something, and the different categories are mentioned. So hunger, loss of wealth, loss of life, your risk, and just be glad, give glad tidings to those who are patient. So I think many times we focus on the different tests and the categorizations of those tests, but the very last word, and this ayah, alhamdulillah, I've read it like quite a few times, I've learned the tafsir of it, but that last word of just being patient, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of the point of this ayah. It's not the point that you will be tested. So I have here on the slide that we can't control the type of test that we get tested with, or when it will come, or how it will come, but you can definitely control, you can say your psychology, you can control your emotional reaction and your level of patience. Next slide. So this is just like a visual graphic for those of us who are more visual learners. And if nothing else made sense, I hope this somewhat simple graphic makes sense. This is just a summary of the research study by Yaqeen Institute. So uncertainty and tolerance. So how high or how low are you in terms of tolerating changing circumstances? That leads to more worry and anxiety, and then worry and anxiety leads to more fear. And it's just sort of like it's a horrible, vicious cycle. So if you want to make a change, the change will be at the very first rectangle. Essentially increasing your tolerance for ever-changing circumstances. Next slide. Okay, so I do want to connect this with taqwa before moving on to anxiety really quickly. So we know that the month of Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and one of the main objectives of fasting, as we learn in Surah Al-Baqarah, is to attain taqwa. And there's like several articles and podcasts and videos out there by well-known scholars, and they've talked a lot about taqwa. So over here, I'm just going to focus on just a slightly different perspective of taqwa, which I think many times for me is just about making choices, because taqwa, you're kind of in between the love of Allah and the hope that there will be reward, and then the fear and the warnings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So taqwa is all about making choices in one definition. So for example, what will you do when you have a chance, for example, to listen to music versus the Quran, especially in the month of Ramadan? This might be a test for many of us. What would you do if you had to pick between different emotions, to get angry or to forgive, especially with social distancing and with your family, like being in your face all day, and with fasting and everyone's hungry? So these are the choices that we're having to make every single day. Social media sites, and in Ramadan, thankfully, we tend to, like on a collective level, I think, make the right choices. So generally, we're usually okay because we're fasting. Many times your survival instinct kicks in. And hopefully this month of training can help us to continue make the right choices afterwards as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so the final results from the study, when they did this survey looking at, I'm not sure what the sample size was, this was done in the States, and they found that these were like the top 2 or 3 things that actually helped people increase in their level of tolerance to uncertainty. So just having a more positive outlook by, number 1, reading the Quran. And I do want to mention here, I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the study or not, but not just like reading the Arabic unless you totally understand what the Quran is saying, but also perhaps taking like a tafsir class, or at minimum reading the English translation, just so you can reflect, because you can't really reflect if you're reading something in a different language and you don't understand that language. Secondly, seeing and being more mindful of the blessings of Allah. Some people, they need to like write them down. Some people need to make a chart. Some people can just look at it and just reflect. You can draw it out if you're more of an artsy person. So whatever you need to do, but just being a bit more critical and reflective of the blessings of Allah, and being more mindful as well. And finally, having that attitude of gratitude, as people say, just having a grateful disposition for whatever blessings that we are currently experiencing. Interestingly, and I have it at the bottom in the red, that checking the news more often and just checking like social media sites was actually negatively correlated with more levels of uncertainty and tolerance. So someone had given me this tip that they check the news, like they do like a morning check-in and then they do an evening check-in. I just do it like just in the morning. I'll just go on like 680news.com. I can't look at visuals for some reason. It gets me really anxious, so I just read it. So if you want to just read the news, if that helps, that's just another tip that I found works for me. So it's just interesting to see that something that perhaps we're all doing a lot more now, which is checking the news, actually can increase your, can decrease your uncertainty tolerance. Next slide. So here's just another, again, for the visual learners, just another diagram from the article. So it's there, the reference is there. So this is just comparing in the orange uncertainty intolerance and in the blue uncertainty tolerance. And just what I mentioned earlier, positive outlook, positive ways of coping can actually increase your uncertainty tolerance. And then the other things, feeling anxious, for example, having a negative outlook, Coping in a negative way, and I'll talk about negative coping in just the next few slides, that can actually lead to higher forms of uncertainty and intolerance. So you're just, when things change, you are not flexible. You end up getting angry at yourself, angry at others. Some people, of course, even get angry with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that why are we being punished or tested like this? So all of this comes under this concept of not being able to change and adapt to your circumstances. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just very quickly, I wanted to talk about the community and social aspect because I've been getting a few questions about that. So now we are in Ramadan, and there's always this idea of like strengthening the bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood and have iftar together and share food. But how are we exactly going to do that? So of course, you can still feed others, be creative, of course, take all the safety precautions, and you can still support local Muslim restaurants. There's so many home catering businesses. There's like a friend of my mom's, she makes like samosas from home. So we just like bought our samosas from her for this Ramadan. So there's lots of ways you can still support people even during this time. Next slide. And within the social paradigm comes the rights of others, and the rights of your family, of course, come first. And again, we are all together right now in very close quarters. So joining the ties of family and friends, especially if things have been a bit rocky before Ramadan, trying to make that up, especially with your parents, first and foremost, siblings, relatives, your spouse, your in-laws. If you, I don't think many of you guys live with your in-laws right now. This is not the demographic for this. But looking after the comfort of your family and trying to reduce even the workload of your mom, dad, family members, especially for me when I was in high school and undergrad. I saw how much my mom would do for us in Ramadan, and now I'm a mom myself, and I'm like, oh my God, like there's so much work to do. So you really appreciate the help of your spouse and kids. Okay, and then the last slide just on social distancing, and then I'll end off with anxiety, inshallah, and how to cope with anxiety. So with regards to social distancing, just giving a few like practical, quick things that actually I've tried with my 4-year-old son, as much as he could help me with this. So you can create like wellness Zoom or Skype check-ins with family, friends, and neighbors. I know a friend of mine is doing that like on a weekly basis, just like a quick 30-minute mental health check-in. You can create welcome Ramadan gift baskets, like just order stuff from Amazon if you don't want to go out, and just leave like a little basket on your neighbors' porches or in their backyards, and you don't have to see anyone, you don't have to get close to anybody. You can create cue cards or even prompts for each day. So just get like a shoebox or a basket and just have like 30 cards in there. One card could be like, I don't know, call a distant relative. One card could be make dessert today for iftar. So just different creative things that you can do as well. Just think outside of the box. Another thing that we had tried to do was just making thank you cards for the garbage disposal workers, for the postal workers, and they really appreciated that as well. Like when we left a little card on our garbage bin, like they took it. I don't know how they felt, but hopefully they appreciated these little gestures. So you can still do a lot of things, even if we are physically distant from each other, but we can still have that social connection. Okay, so very quickly, just moving on to the second part, inshallah, which is just anxiety, stress, and coping. Next slide. Okay, so your normal stress response, and I think if you guys have taken like biology or physiology, you might be aware of this. So stress just normal, this is a very simple diagram. This is of course not the whole hormonal and chemical reaction. Just to put it simply, is many times it is an external cause, and it causes a mild physical response, which can actually help you function better in that situation. And when the stressor is gone, when that physical stimulus is removed from the environment, your emotions and the fight, flight, or freeze response also comes down as well. So that's your normal stress response. Now, on the next slide, we see the anxiety response. And this is what many people are feeling, I think, nowadays. And I also felt this as well. So don't have to be ashamed of this. So essentially, anxiety is a very similar physiological response, but it's actually just because of something that does not necessarily exist in your environment. So it could be an emotional thing. It could just be something that you're thinking about, just something that you're worrying about. So it's not there necessarily. You're just thinking about something that has happened in the past or will happen in the future, or you are uncertain about something. and the same physiological things happen. Your palms might get sweaty, heart racing, headache, stomach cramps, all of those things happen. So your body's like, okay, I got to get into my stress survival response mode. And then there's nowhere to go. There's like, you're not fighting anything. You are like, you might freeze up. There's nothing to like fight. There's nothing to resolve necessarily, because it's an emotion. And that's when counseling comes in handy, because counseling helps you with controlling your thought processes. But physically, there's nothing to change in your environment. And that's when chronic anxiety can develop many times as well, when you're not able to regulate your negative thoughts, especially when they're thoughts about uncertainty and things changing very quickly. Okay, so the next slide, just very quickly, sometimes just some of the ways that we tend to cope with these things, and I'm not saying these are like good or bad, I'm just saying it as a neutral researcher, that many times we just cope with Netflix. Like, it's just easy just to put on a show, distract yourself. Like, you don't need to watch the news. You can be in a fictional world for a little while. The next slide, another way of coping, of course, is eating. This can be, of course, a little bit more serious. I know that sometimes we all do a little bit of snacking and watching, but just being mindful of course, eating disorders and emotional eating, that can get quite serious. And the next slide, another way of coping is just browsing social media. Yeah, I would say like YouTube is probably my biggest, like, I really gotta like get off of YouTube. And everyone has their own vices, so you can just judge for yourself. Don't judge anyone else. And then, of course, in the next slide, we see video games. I actually had to like ask my like teenage nephews what they're playing these days, because I do not play these games. I think I'm really old school. I would play like Counter-Strike and like Need for Speed, and I don't even know if these exist anymore.
The good days, those are the good days,
so
yeah.
They do, okay. So sometimes just, again, getting into like a fictional world, using all of these as distractions can be a coping mechanism, but maybe not the healthiest way to cope. Okay, so the next slide, coming back to research again and the literature, there's a lot of literature, and there's many studies been done on coping. And there's one of my actually studies in my PhD was looking at how Muslim Syrian refugees are coping with financial insecurity as they resettle in Toronto. And there's like positive coping, negative coping, maladaptive coping. There's a whole bunch. I've just listed a few over here for our context. So we know from many studies that religious or spiritual forms of coping, like reading the Quran, making dua, praying, even like mindfulness, if you're into like meditation and yoga, that can be super helpful. There's also social ways of coping, so communicating with family and friends. And I think what's making people a little bit more anxious nowadays is that they have this anxiety, they're feeling uncertain, and they can't go hang out with like their friends or people that they usually see as a form of coping. So you got to get really creative and still figure out your support system, but just do it online or in a safe way. And then, of course, there's negative ways of coping. So this is called like maladaptive, or you can say it's even avoidant coping. Some of the things we talked about earlier, Netflix, video games, eating junk food, for example. Excessively purchasing supplies, hoarding things, the whole toilet paper situation, watching a lot more entertainment. So all of these things are actually under the negative ways of coping. So as long as you're doing it as a distraction, this is how one therapist put it to me, that if you know that, okay, you're distracting yourself just for a little while, it's fine. But if you have like some serious like emotional dysregulation, chronic stress and anxiety, and your only way of coping is by eating or watching something, then that's problematic. So just know, are you just distracting yourself for a little while? You just want to get out of the zone, or are you actually using it as a way to help you feel better? Okay, so in the next slide, just a couple of practical tips, and then we will end off, inshallah. So what can we do as Muslims, bringing the Islamic paradigm back? So we all know about this idea of tawakkul, a lot of definitions for tawakkul. I liked Ibn Taymiyyah's definition on this, that tawakkul comprises of relying on Allah in order for Allah to help you with what you need, and also relying on Him for the things that you cannot achieve. So it's like a double definition, you can say. So the things that you need help with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And the things that you know you cannot do and you cannot achieve, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also there, and you're okay that you're not going to be able to achieve those things. So practical steps in combining tawakkul with what you can do in terms of your own psychology and self-help and self-counseling. So number one, this might be like a little bit nerdy, but I don't know, I do this and this it's helped me. So just keeping like a diary or a journal. My brother still makes fun of me for this. And it's interestingly, I kept, I don't have it here, but I have like two notebooks. So one is like my emotions and one is more academic. So the emotion stuff, of course, I'm just writing down like my personal feelings, what's been going in my head as these days progress. And the more academic stuff is just like when I find like a research article about COVID-19, or when I listen to like an Islamic scholar and their reflections. So that's like my feelings about their feelings reacting to COVID. So again, you can journal if you want. If this is like way too nerdy and out there, you can like draw something, you can paint, and you can even just learn a new skill. By learning a new skill, you're cognitively changing your thought process. You're so focused on learning something new that your old habits have a harder time returning back. The other thing is nutrition and exercise. So this is, of course, before Ramadan, but now especially during Ramadan as well, that sometimes people say, well, I can just like skip meals. I'm not that hungry. I'm just home all day anyway. This is the other problem on the opposite side of eating too much. But just know that even this situation, it's unique and challenging. So it is affecting your body, but in a different way. So alhamdulillah, we are home all day. We can maybe relax a bit more, but it's not by choice. So it's very different psychologically what that means for us. And the last thing, this is actually more for myself, was that there's lots of workshops and free lectures. We're doing one thing today and virtual classes. But don't get overwhelmed. There's a lot out there. Just pick one thing, especially for the month of Ramadan, and just focus on that. So it could be like one class. I'm thinking of doing Sheikh Yasser Qadi's class, the 30 days and 30 days of tafsir. There's so many different things happening. So just pick one and just try and stick to that. The final piece of, this is like, I hate giving advice because this is something we don't do in like counseling and in research psychology, but just a tip or a suggestion, this has helped me immensely as well, is if you're not already like a student of the Quran, perhaps seriously considering becoming a student of the Quran, even like part-time, and this could be all done online. And what happens is when you become like a student of something, of a particular discipline, you get so like entrenched in that paradigm, in learning about that thing. Everything is so new. And I'm just suggesting the Quran right now instead of something else like maybe psychology or biology, because I'm sure you guys are already exposed to these subjects. So for me, like my opening to this world was at Al-Huda Institute, where I completed the Ta'lim al-Quran course. So in that we learned like root words and analysis and tafsir and tajweed. And just by coming to class and doing like your assignments and doing the tests, sometimes being forced to do these things, it just helps you become a better person in terms of your tolerance level. You realize, okay, I can't control these things, so might as well become more tolerant with uncertainty. So it's just an interesting thing that I found, that just by being immersed in something Islamic, and if it benefits you, if you like the teachers, that it can really help with cognitively restructuring your thoughts into something more positive. And inshallah, I'm hoping that as we hopefully embark on this journey, during the month of Ramadan, we can come out of the situation as a better person, as a better Muslim, and as a better student, even in just regular secular schooling. I want to end off with just, in the next couple of slides, these are just some practical self-help tips that you can do at home, or you can just do online. I know there are concerns, like more serious mental health concerns in our community. I did pastoral counseling for a couple of years, and definitely there's a lot happening in our community, from the milder cases to the more serious ones. So if you do need professional help, there's Khalil Center. Their office is located in North York, but they're currently offering all of their therapy, or web therapy. I believe you can even do phone therapy if you wanted to. And there's, sorry, the next slide. Mm-hmm. I just want to say that this is a community psychological and spiritual wellness center. So this is I believe the only center in Canada, if not Ontario, that combines faith-based approaches. So it's rooted in Islamic theology, and then it combines secular psychology. And in the next slide, just some of the services I mentioned, they're offering web therapy, and the fee is based upon your situation. So especially as students, their model is always service before fee. It's a Zakat foundation as well, so you can totally qualify for even free therapy. So don't worry about that at all. And they also have support groups for like women, for single moms, teenagers, anyone who's going through like a divorce or separation, youth and parent struggles, things like that. So that support group is also happening. And my favorite actually is art therapy. One of my colleagues is doing art therapy, and even she is doing it online. So that is just like, I don't even know how she's doing it through Zoom or Skype. So if you have trouble talking about your feelings, you can just draw them, and they will guide you in the process of using art as a form of therapy. Just want to end here, inshallah, on the next slide. Jazakallah khair for listening, and of course, keep calm and stay safe, especially during this month of Ramadan.
All right, thank you so much. That was actually super helpful, even for myself, and I'm sure everybody that was listening.
Jazakallah.
It was our first kind of like lecture style Instagram or social media live stream, and I think people benefit from like more of a structured conversation. Just to wrap it up and going off your last point, like obviously with Ramadan, there's a lot of different resources, workshops, resources online that people can use, whether it's for mental health or like to gain Islamic knowledge in general. But that also leads to people getting overwhelmed and confused as to like, lost as to which direction they should take. So just as a takeaway point, like I know you don't like advice, but what's a suggestion or a tip that you can give to kind of guide people in the right direction as to like what they should seek in terms of what they need?
Yes, for sure. It's a good question. So if I had to just really quickly say something, I think just knowing yourself. So just know what you are needing help for or requiring some more assistance or motivation with. So number one, if you just feel like, you know what, I'm doing okay, it's not too bad, I just need some more motivation, perhaps just listening to motivational speakers. There's so many Islamic and just secular speakers out there. If you feel like, you know what, I have motivation, but I just need help with like setting goals, getting my schoolwork done, or doing work from home, then maybe a life coach might be something that's beneficial. And then thirdly, if it's something that's more like a serious illness, you really feel like your emotions are up and down, you're maybe getting a little bit too angry with your family or just angry with yourself, then perhaps a licensed psychotherapist or a counselor is what you might need. So I'm just looking at it in terms of what you require for yourself. So first, self-awareness, of course. And if I don't know if I can share my email address or anything, but if anyone wants to complete like a personality skill, I think that's one of the easiest ways to just find out what trait levels you're high and low on, and based on your own needs, then going out and seeking out those resources. And the Canadian Muslim Mental Health Association, they have like, I think, a 7-8 page document with all of the Muslim psychotherapists, doctors, researchers, like anyone in the mental health field, and their contact information. So if, I can share that resource sheet as well.
Absolutely. Okay, that was really concise. Thank you for that. We'll be recording or saving this recording and posting it as well, so people have access to it later. And if you're okay, we'll also publish your email so people can reach out if they need any further assistance. But yeah, once again, thank you so much. This was actually super beneficial. And inshallah, we can do more of those live streams in the future.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for helping me with the slide changes.
No worries. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.